say it doesn't matter, then you've never seen the movie My Cousin Vinny. Why is it important? Well, my dad's retired Miami PD before Miami Dade was even a thing. Miami PD, K9, and the day I was born, I was brought home so that his canine, Bruno, could check me out. And yes, really, my first two words were down dog, much to the dismay of my mom. Um, and then when dad got Max, Max was what I would consider a super dog. He could learn anything in 15 minutes and retain it. Max became basically my babysitter. The story goes, because I was vaguely remembered at 4 years old, Dad had gone into the Piggly Wiggly in Inverness and left me with Max in the back of the truck. The truck had a camper shell on it. Dad comes out of the store, sees a small crowd gathering around the tailgate, looking on and laughing, and he hears me yell out, "Stop him!" And then, "Out!" He gets to the back of the truck to see and hear me tell Max, "Watch him." So Max backs up and he sits, and apparently I was so engrossed in whatever I was doing with Max, I didn't see Dad come up. I had my arm in a sleeve that was bigger than I was, and I repeated the scenario over again a couple more times, really, before Dad had even said anything. Well, I just, sat back, watched, and smiled. The crowd was the same way. They were laughing when they figured out that I wasn't being attacked by Max. So, for me, even though I don't remember, I vaguely remember it. But for me, that was part of growing up. You know, I was already putting a sleeve on at 4 years old. In 1976, my uncle David worked for Greene County in Missouri, and Dad wanted to open up a canine academy, so he wanted to be more centrally located so he could bring officers from all over the United States. So we packed everything up and moved up to Stratford, Missouri, out onto a 40 acre farm. The We had the big house, which was a 2-story colonial, and the little house, which was converted into, there was bunk beds, and it was one bathroom and a little kitchen. It was like a mother-in-law's house, but it was converted into a place where the handlers could stay because they were going to be there for months at a time. Um, there were outbuildings, so the outbuildings got converted into indoor-outdoor kennels, and that was when Dad got the LLC for Centurion Canine Academy. So I was Dad's shadow. Everywhere Dad went, I went, unless I was in school. And my job was to help and stay out of trouble. So I was put to task. I fed, watered, cleaned kennels. I took the puppies out, conditioned the puppies. Um, as soon as I was old enough to count, I was laying tracks, hiding in buildings from or wherever. I could be out in the middle of a yard. It didn't matter, depending on what the dog was looking for. In obedience trainings, some of the board and trained dogs, if I could physically handle the dogs, Dad would let me do it. So, at that time, I was also the secretary. So I was answering the phone, and this was me, and this is no joke. I remember I have this down still to this day. Centurion Canine Academy, how may I help you? The caller would be like, what are you trained for out there? Me? Obedience training? Sit, down, come, stay, on and off leash, lead, distance control, and also handler protection. The caller, how much and how long? Me, hang on, let me go get my dad. I didn't know any of that stuff. Caller's usually like, wait, what? Come on. In 1977, I was 6 years old, and my first dog that Dad let me actually train completely on my own for obedience was Dixie. Dixie went to Dr. Thomas Zimmerman, who was the president of Assemblies of God. She she wasn't protection trained, but she knew what she was supposed to do to keep her family safe. But she was really good. And also in 1977, That's when um, the business with Centurion Canine got, was kind of getting off the ground, and Dad started pitching the training program to law enforcement agencies all over the country. We would take Max, and he would use Max as a demo dog. But normally, I got thrown in the back of the vehicle with my PJs on because Dad always drove overnight. Um, then they started. He would once he would pitch the training program. The officers started coming from as far away as Alaska. There was Alaska, Indiana, Ohio. I mean, just all over the place, and they were all coming out to Stratford with green dogs to train for months. Um, Once this started, the need for standardized training and testing was needed. And so, along with Bob Compton, I want to say he was out of Indiana. I know he had two sons. One's name was Rusty. Rusty eventually went in as a canine handler for Indiana State Police. But that was how North American Police Sport Dog Association was born. I also got new phone skills because I was answering for Napwata and Centurion Canine at the same time. Um, Usually, my day consisted of getting up, going to school, getting in trouble in school. Then, when I got home, doing chores, which I already told you what my chores were. I was to be seen and not heard, and I hung out and watched all the handlers learning. And then at the end of the day, sitting down at the dining room table for dinner with all the officers that were there was usually no more than four, three or four, um, so that my mom, had cooked dinner when she came home from work, and all the officers would sit down at the table, and we'd have one hot meal, I guess, for the officers at the end of the day. I was also the find the baby. I was the dummy for any of the tracking or, um, I was always with the officers. I was always with Dad. So it was one time Dad got called out to run a track with Max out of Green. I think it was Springfield PD that called him for a murder suspect that had ran, and they couldn't find him. So he drops me off at this business. I don't even know what the business is for. I don't know who these people were. Dad said, sit. So I did because I was raised that way. Yes, sir, Daddy, sir. Sit and wait with these people, and I'll be right back. So I'm waiting with strangers until Dad comes back. They found him. In 1980, that was a really bad year for me. December of 1980, I was 9 years old, and my parents decided that they were going to get a divorce. Well, more so, my dad decided he was going to get a divorce. So he, my mom and I wound up moving into a one-bedroom furnished apartment because the business was out there on the farm, and that was his business. But on Christmas Eve of 1980, Dad shows up and hands Mom the divorce papers, says Merry Christmas, and then he leaves. And within the next few months, the big house actually burned down with everything I owned in it except for the stuffed animals I was able to take with me. Dad had to call all the boarding customers to have them come get their dogs, and one of them, who worked at the Federal Medical Center as a guard or a detention officer, whatever you want to call him in Springfield, got pissed off that he had to come and get his dog, so he shot and killed my horse out of revenge. Now, why did I tell you all that? Well, because when you grow up for the first 9 years of your life knowing nothing other than, working dogs and being around police officers and all that kind of stuff, when you're broke and you're by yourself, you return to what you know. So in 93, I wasn't intending on training dogs or going into law enforcement. I wanted to be a marine biologist, but I wound up going to work for Hornbeck Kennels in Springfield. I was a walk-in as a trainer, um, and here are some of the dogs that I was given credit for. But all the dogs that I trained, I, Jim sold them, and this is why it bothers me with civilian trainers, because he got all the credit and got all the money, and I was getting paid $3.30 something cents under the table, and we were doing all the work. It was me and Brett. So Greif was one of the ones I trained 640 plus hours. I trained him from green to go. Um, he had a problem with spinning. I don't know what his deal was. He would be searching, and all of a sudden he'd come off the wall, and then spin right back around and hit right where he got off the wall. Heller was sold after I trained him out for personal protection, at least 640 hours because he had never played with the toy before. Belton PD, Jackie Springer came down. I trained Hank um, out for patrol tracking narcotics. Uh, I've got a picture of that. And then Anna did the same thing. So I was fired basically in December of 1993 or somewhere around there because I wouldn't let Jim grab a hold of my boob and do whatever he wanted to do. He was an old pervert and he was an asshole. So he fired me. In the same at the same time, um, the sheriff picked me up. Sheriff J.T. Roberts picked me up and gave me a job working dispatch, jail, and I was a canine officer. Come on. So I started working with Pulaski County. I also worked with Webster County C. Wells, who eventually after I trained his dog. I did wind up working for Jackie whenever she became chief of police in Greenwood. Uh, but those are the dogs that I can remember off the top of my head. Besides Ike, Damien, Candy, there was a Greene County narc dog that was assigned to the airport, and the dog was having a behavioral issue with not wanting to check the bags anymore. So I had to work through problem dogs a lot. That happened to me a lot. I was given a lot of the tougher dogs. And also Pottawatomie County, Kansas, there was a narcotics detection dog um, that we trained. It was an Australian Shepherd, and what's really funny is that the dog actually started doing bite work just out of whatever. Then I was also an undercover Greene County deputy um, that we trained a narcotics detection dog for. I also participated with doing a narc raid with Greene County and this undercover deputy, and I started cutting my teeth on highway interdiction with Don Blankenship out of Phelps County. So here's a picture of Jackie. Here's a picture of C.E. Wells with Magnum and uh, I think it's just Magnum. And this me with my dog Tucker. This is when I went to go pick up Rambo. And we'll go back in just a minute. This is when I graduated Highway Patrol, the basic law enforcement academy in Jeff City. There was my, just so you know, I actually went, and that's the target. That was my qualifying target. I was working for Richland PD in that picture. All right, so I worked for Pulaski County with K9 Rambo, Richland PD with K9 Rambo. I worked for Republic PD with no K9, Greenwood PD with no K9, Eldon PD I had K9 Sprint, Lake of the Ozarks PD I had K9 Sprint. I was a member of the Missouri Narcotics Officers Association, and at one point in time I did a mutual aid assist with Miller County, which Rambo tracked down a murder suspect from the scene of the crime all the way to where he had his truck parked. And so, just to abbreviate this, I worked until '98. I had to put Rambo down. I still had Sprint, and things kind of fell apart, and so I moved to Florida. And I will get to the rest of that on the next one. But that's the first part of my life. Anyway,